Hello, I'm an old fart, and I have a guilty pleasure. I like knives. I'm not an expert or an official representative of anybody, I'm just like knives. I collect small folding pocket knives, mainly what I call non-threatening gentleman's knives. And for the last year or more, while we were all shut indoors through the COVID-19 pandemic, you've been virtually visiting me on a little tour of my collection. Thanks for the company. Today we're going to have a look at this knife. This is a Kizer Matanzas. There's no fancy story about how I came to have this knife. I just saw it in a catalog and I liked the look. I liked the look of the carbon fiber, the titanium. I like frame locks, I like flippers. There were a few reviews, not very many actually, surprisingly, but what I found was generally positive, so I ordered one. So I'll say up front, I got a couple of things wrong. It wasn't quite what I was expecting in a couple of ways. We'll come to that. It's a fine knife. There's a lot good about it, but it's not really my thing, air quotes. Not a non-threatening gentleman's knife. I'm probably going to keep it now because, well, you know, collection, knives. But knowing now what I knew then, I probably wouldn't have ordered it. Anyway, we'll come back to that. It is a fine knife. So formally, Kizer Knives, Matanzas. This is the carbon fiber version. It is a side flipper knife and a titanium frame lock, quite traditional titanium frame lock. And as I say, side flipper. Now, despite this long groove here, there is not a nail nick. I thought that was a nail nick, and that's the first thing I got wrong. I assumed that that would be an option for opening this knife, but as you can see, that groove is completely inside the handle, so it's not a useful nail nick for opening. So, side flipper. The size is the second thing that I got wrong. I didn't pay enough attention, and I didn't realize how big this thing is. It's big. It's not huge, not the largest knife in my collection, but it's in that territory. It's big. Bigger than I normally like. So let's have a look at that. So it's 203 millimeters end to end, which is, using our internationally recognized knife scale, it is about 1.2 pocket calculators. I try to keep my knives under 1 pocket calculator. So it's big by that most important of all measures. If we compare it to a few other knives, well, my mini griptilian is sort of my standard of the size I like. As you can see, it's much larger than a mini griptilian. It's a knife that I've always thought of as kind of one of my large knives is the large Sebenza. And as you can see, that is a small Sebenza. I'll just go and get the large Sebenza. Stand by a second. So as you can see, it's larger than a small Sebenza. And it is smaller than a large Sebenza. But that is in big knife territory. So I looked around saying, do I have anything that is the same size as this knife? And I came up with this. It is just about exactly the same size as the Monterey Bay Knives Old Guard, which is a knife I like a lot, but I consider it just a little too large for kind of formal office carry. So I'd say the Matanzas is in that same class. The weight is also a fairly heavy knife. It's 109 grams, which is slightly heavier than the Monterey Bay Knives Old Guard, which we showed you a second ago, and it is slightly less weight than the large Sebenza. So it's kind of in that order by weight. So it's a large knife and a fairly heavy knife. Anyway, so the size aside, and it's really a little bigger than I would normally say I collect. Size aside, how is it as a knife? Well, it's got a beautiful blade. The blade is S35 VN steel, which is a fine steel. It's a drop point. I like drop points. The blade is quite long, and long enough that I think it looks a bit threatening and daggerish. We'll come back to that. But as a cutting tool, it's a beautiful blade, fine steel, a good edge. The body is titanium, and on the presentation side is this beautiful woven carbon fiber. And I really like that woven style of carbon fiber because I like the three-dimensional effect that you get when the light hits it at varying angles. The clip is very pretty. It's a milled titanium clip. Actually, I guess that is probably a titanium sheet clip bent, isn't it? That doesn't look milled. But the neat thing about this clip, I think unlike any other knife in my collection, is that it's sitting on standoffs. Can I make that visible? There we are. There are actually separate standoffs there that are holding the top of the clip up. So just an interesting design variation that I think is quite nice, quite pretty. The clip is canted, so it doesn't sit on the lock bar. I think that's an important design thing that was an innovation not that long ago. Now it's becoming almost standard. It is a shallow carry clip. It's quite a deep shallow carry, but it is shallow carry. So that much knife sticks out of your pocket, and I prefer a knife to be a little less conspicuous than that. And the clip is not movable like most frame locks. This is very much a one-sided knife, so everything goes on this side. There is no lanyard hole, but I think if you really cared, you could put a lanyard around this standoff pin. This one is too close to the blade, and the blade would abrade the lanyard. But this one, if the lanyard was tied tightly, I think you could, can I get it so you can see in there? There we are. I think you could put a tightly tied lanyard around that pin if you cared to. But I don't think I would. I'm not that crazy about lanyards anyway, but I really do think it would spoil the appearance of the knife. How about ambidextrousness, ambidextrosity, ambidextritude? Opening, sure, it's a side flipper, so you can open that equally well with both. Now, I don't know if I can. Okay, I can. You can open it equally well with both hands. Closing, no. It's a frame lock. It really needs to be closed from this side so your thumb can push the lock out of the way. I suppose you could learn to do that with your left hand. And I suppose lefties have to learn how to do that, but I can't. Appearance, of course, big no. There is a clear presentation side and a clear mechanical side, so not ambidextrous in look, but in opening, sure. And it's manufactured in China. I don't know where. Kizer, I think, has their own manufacturing plant. They do good work, so manufactured in and by Kizer, China. So that's kind of the tour of the specs. Before I get into a couple of things I don't like about this knife, there are a lot to like. So first, as I mentioned already, it is a very handsome knife closed. I love the woven carbon fiber. I like the attractive design, some very nice touches. I like the decorated pocket pivot screws, for example. They have a spiral pattern milled into them, so more than just your average boring screw. And there's a little bit of anodized color on the edges of the pivot screws to add a little bit more visual pop. So I like that. I like the fact that the stonewash blade is that kind of gray stonewash. It's not the mirror silver finish, and that makes the gray writing, of which there is quite a lot, a little more subtle. It doesn't jump out at you so much, and that's good. I prefer an under-decorated blade to an over-decorated blade. I do like the subtle clip, I mentioned that, and I'll say, as an actual cutting tool, it's very comfortable. Because it's big, you easily get a full grip. The recess here for accessing the frame lock makes a wonderful finger recess. So a very comfortable full grip, and there are no hot spots. Even the clip is just sized so that it's sitting in a natural crease of my hand. There's no jimping on the knife. Nothing on the back, for example. And of course, carbon fiber is slippery. So I suppose if you were working in slippery conditions, you might find this knife a little hard to hold. But I don't know if that's true. I think these finger recesses may give you all the grip you need. So anyway, comfortable knife to hold and a good cutter. It's a generous blade. There's lots of cutting surface there. Good shape. I like drop points. And of course, S35 VN is great steel. Holds an edge well, not too hard to sharpen. So a lot that I like about this knife. There are some things I don't like. The primary one is that that's a long blade, and it looks kind of threatening when it's open. We'll rate that a little more seriously in a moment, but it has this harpoon bulge on the back and a swedge. That makes it look a little bit more threatening. And the thing I really don't like about the blade is it has this fuller along the edge, this groove. sometimes incorrectly called a runnel. It's actually a fuller, and often, and very incorrectly, called a blood groove. And because it's commonly called a blood groove, people think that's so you can stab your enemies and this helps the blood clear away. That is not what a fuller is for. It has been discovered to be a way that you can mill a recess into a blade, which reduces its weight, because it's quite a bit of metal has been removed there, without noticeably reducing the strength of the blade. So it's both a design feature, a decoration if you like, and a way to make a blade a little bit lighter. It is not a groove for helping to funnel blood out of the way of when it's embedded in your enemies. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of people think it's for, and so when they look at this blade, they say weapon. And, well, I don't like that. The other thing I'll say that I don't like is it's not easy to flip well. I haven't managed to do one in front of you yet, but that's a lot of blade. It's long, there's a lot of inertia, a lot of momentum needs to be built up there, and quite a small flipper tab. And I get frequent misfires. There we are. I get frequent misfires with this blade. Now, you could flick it open the rest of the way, of course, but I'd like it to be more reliable opening. I don't know if that would mean a bigger flipper tab or smoother bearings or what, but I'd like a little more reliable opening. I mentioned smoother bearings. This is really smooth now, but it was quite gritty when it came out of the box. I could feel a noticeable gritty resistance as I was operating the blade. I have no idea how long it sat on the shelf before I bought it, so it may have been just dried out. I found I did not need to loosen the pivot screws. I'm sure that would have reduced things a bit. I just let a little bit of lube seep down into both sides, worked it a few times, and now it's just fine. So, but yeah, out of the box, not quite as smooth as I would have liked. The other thing I'll point out is that there is almost no choil on this blade, just a tiny little choil on the edge there. So when sharpening, there's lots of opportunity for a stone when you're sharpening to encounter the shoulder of the blade and scrape or mar it. I would like a little more sharpening choil. And final, common with frame lock knives, your parts are in harm's way as you begin to close the knife. Now, on most flippers, the flipper tab, when it comes around to the other side, is acting like a finger guard, so you're getting some protection from that. But this one, a flipper, is so small and cleverly shaped so that it's sitting inside the body there, which is very nice. I mean, that makes it look quite elegant. But you're basically losing its function as a finger guard. So it is definitely possible to shut the knife on your finger. I would prefer that not be the case, but you know, stay awake and be careful is the message. So those are the things I don't like about the knife. Let's go through my internationally unknown knife rating system. We'll start with the NTGK, which is for non-threatening gentleman's knife. We'll do non-threatening first. So as a non-threatening knife, a knife I would be comfortable taking out in the boardroom and not scaring my fellow executives. Well, the good news is, you know, the fancy carbon fiber makes it look decorative, which makes it look a little less weapony. Okay? And I do like the fact that it's understated. The writing is understated, but it's low contrast. You know, and there are no goblins and zombies and tactical shapes and barbs on it. So that's all good. The bad is the blade. The long blade with the fuller that people think is for blood. Scary looking blade, harpooned back. It's pretty hard to tell people that that thing doesn't have its roots as a weapon. And the final thing as well that makes it threatening is that, like any flipper, there really isn't any easy way to open it two-handed. You pretty much have to open it one-handed, and when you do that, people go, ah, switchblade. So, now, of course, with any flipper, you can open it two-handed by catching the blade and then opening it, but that feels dangerous. And you know, it doesn't help convince people that your knife is not a threat if you cut yourself with it while you're opening it. So it's a fairly high threat knife. So I'm only going to give it a B as a non-threatening. As a gentleman's knife, the good news is the materials. High-end materials, gentleman's jewelry is usually built out of premium materials. This carbon fiber, titanium, elegant milling, elegant decoration on things like the pivot screw, so that's all good. A lot of writing on it, but the writing is subtle because it's gray on gray, so that's good. The subtle clip with the interesting design thing of the standoffs, so a nice looking knife that you can easily say is a gentleman's fashion accessory. That's good. The bad news is it's big, bigger than a gentleman's knife needs to be. It's heavy, so when it's sitting in your pocket, first of all, it's not a shallow carry clip, so it's sticking out of your pocket, and it's deforming the edge of your pocket. So it's not a very carry-friendly knife. And of course, the scary blade. Gentlemen don't carry weapons with blood grooves. So overall, so I'd say a B for a gentleman's knife. Overall, I'm going to give it a B as an NT-GK. It's pretty enough that it's not a C, but it's a pretty scary looking knife. Next, how about the KN rating, which is for what would my knife nerd friends think? Well, the pro is the overall design is really quite attractive. It's a well-known designer. His name's on it here somewhere. Rick Swan. It's a nice shape, easy to hold, so an attractive design. Premium materials, knife nerds like S35 VN steel, they like titanium, they like carbon fiber. So they'll be impressed with all that. The con for knife nerds is the occasional misfire. That it's just not that impressive an action. There you go. That would lose a point with a knife nerd. So I'd give it an A as a knife nerd rating, not an A+ because of that little uncertain action. And finally, the CMR, the cut myself rating. Well, I've never cut myself on it, so it's an A. It's a simple rating. So that kind of brings us to the end. In summary, this is a very handsome knife to look at. And it's a very useful knife to actually use. It's a useful size, it's comfortable to hold and cut with. However, despite the attractive carbon fiber scales, the blade size and the aggressive looking fuller make it threatening looking. So for me, it's not a frequent carry to the office, but it is a frequent weekend knife when I'm not worried about scaring my fellow executives and when I want to have a useful sized knife with me. And that is that. Thanks for following along. Hope to see you again next time. Bye-bye.